You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Conservative Home's deputy editor, Henry Hill, and Politics Joe's political correspondent, Ava Santina Evans. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Financial Times leads with Donald Trump's speech following his 34 felony convictions, in which he again said the trial was rigged and pledged to appeal. The Mail highlights Mr. Trump's insistence that Joe Biden has created a fascist state. And the Telegraph leads on Boris Johnson's dismissal of Trump's conviction as the result of a hit job. But the Mirror calls the former US president deluded, deranged and dangerous. The Guardian leads on Zelensky's claim that US delays on using Western weapons against targets in Russia has left troops laughing at Ukraine. A poll conducted on behalf of the Eyes suggests that 56% of those surveyed want a new government. The Times reports on Sir Keir Starmer's pledge to create wealth if he becomes Prime Minister. The Express has news of a simple saliva test which can be taken at home and may save thousands of men from dying of prostate cancer each year. And according to The Star, an astronomer who has regular chats with the King has reportedly told him that most people in his profession believe aliens are real. They had boffs, not boffins today. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Henry Hill and Ava Santina Evans. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with Donald Trump, shall we? The front page of the FT weekend. Trump lashes out at rigged trial after historic criminal convictions and no surprises that he's vowing to fight on. He will appeal.
Yeah, of course he will. He's Donald Trump. He has managed to defy the laws of political gravity through sheer chutzpah for years, and he's not going to stop now. Basically, the story is he has been found guilty on all 34 counts. The details of it are slightly strange because it's called a hush money trial, but the trial was not over the fact that he paid alleged hush money to a porn star he slept with, but the paperwork that he generated to pay it back, which is a bit like getting... Precisely, it's a bit like getting Al Capone on his tax returns. But he says so far it has really just driven a surge in donations, small donations and a few mega donors, according to the FT. And given that, as we heard on Sky earlier, it doesn't seem as if this story is going to end up giving him any jail time. The question is, yes, obviously, we're all shocked by Donald Trump, but we've been shocked by Donald Trump for years. If it hasn't damaged him with his own voters, how much of a difference is this going to make to the race, depressing as that thought is?
I mean, we know that technically the 34 counts on which Trump was convicted carry a maximum prison sentence of 4 years. I believe that's for each count. So there are 34. I mean, they could run consecutively. We don't know. But everyone so far has said that's just never going to happen.
Yeah, they're saying that it's highly unlikely he will actually see jail time, but he will see potentially a hefty fine. And as we've said, he will appeal. But that appeal is very unlikely to be before the next election. So he will be heading into the election as the Republican nominee as a convicted criminal. But look, you know, Trump's very excited about it all. He said he's honoured to be convicted by a criminal court yesterday, and that America is a fascist state, and the prosecution, they're devils. So a good day for Donald Trump. He also made this speech, you know, right where he announced his first run for American president back in 2016. So, you know, he's having a good couple of days in terms of press.
Yeah.
And Henry, he's been repeating the assertion that this is all politically motivated and this is all because of Joe Biden.
So America really doesn't make it easy on this front, because it is the case that the prosecutor who brought these charges was elected to that role, which is very weird to Brits, on a platform of bringing charges against Donald Trump. So that makes it easier when you've got a politicised system like that to drum up these kind of charges and dispute the legitimacy of cases. But it is important to remember that the trial was completely fair. The jury wasn't stacked. You know, maybe the decision to reopen the prosecution was driven by a desire to go after Donald Trump. But if he'd been innocent, he'd have been found innocent, and he hasn't been. So no, this has got nothing to do with Joe Biden. The decision to reopen the prosecution was partly political, but there's no reason to think that the judgment has been.
The front page of the Mirror, their headline there, delude, deranged, dangerous.
I know, why don't they tell us how they really think? Yes, so that's not the best front page there for Donald Trump. But look, this is actually the exact sort of promo that I think he would like. You know, I think they're going to really go after his campaign, will really go after the sort of leftists in America. And this sort of press, if this is replicated over in the US, will do, you know, wonders for him in incentivising his base.
And that's the thing, they're reporting that they've had record donations to his campaign following his conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a realistic chance that if he does end up with that huge fine, that millions of ordinary Americans will step up to pay it for him, which is absolutely extraordinary when you say it out loud, but that is the general dynamic of his campaign. I think the problem is that America is now so polarised that regardless of, you know, there's no evidence that the court was stacked or that there was anything political about the actual finding, millions of people just are prepared to believe that the Democratic establishment, so-called, is going after Donald Trump. And therefore, whilst hopefully maybe, you know, floating voters will be alienated by this, for Trump's committed supporters, all this really tells them is that, right, the establishment are going after him. He must really be the man we need to back. In
the Mail, Ava, the headline there, Trump rages at Biden's fascist state. It was a diatribe, wasn't it, really, that speech that he made today, blaming migrants and whoever else for what's happening to him in the state of America.
It really felt a bit like a lucky dip today. It sort of was, he was sort of rolling the tombola and then picking out, I guess, certain groups that might have made the headlines over the last couple of years and sort of blamed them as, you know, and made this incredible concoction of reasons of why he'd been convicted. It also felt very confused. It reminds you of actually how he was, you know, his sort of style of oratory that we were used to when he was president. It always sort of felt very confused, very hatchet job, very last minute, and didn't quite have a proper flow to it. But, you know, what's really interesting, actually, so this piece, when we get into the inside page of the Mail, it starts to get into the fundraising. The emails that have gone out since his conviction are fascinating. They are really quite frightening. You know, it's Donald Trump telling his supporters that he's a political prisoner and so they need to donate to him immediately. You know, it's quite concerning that people could be really riled up over the next couple of weeks.
And he is really playing to that narrative that he is a victim, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been his line throughout. You know, the election was stolen from him, and since then, you know, the dark forces that are governing America will stop at nothing to bring down one Donald J. Trump. And yeah, for over here, Trump is funny, right? You know, we're not in that country. When he does his media performances, when he does his weird speeches, like, there is something entertaining about him. But what you were saying is really important, because the level of polarisation that we see in the US is nothing like we've had over here, even during Brexit. And the way that some of these campaigns are reaching out to voters and firing people up is really frightening, because ultimately, yeah, America has to be governed as one country. Whoever wins the election and whoever wins the one after that, you can't have Red America and Blue America living completely parallel lives. They have to have one president. And at this rate, it's going to be really hard for either side to get losers' consent.
Bringing the story back to the UK, there's an intervention from one Boris Johnson on the case and the conviction of Donald Trump. And he's saying that it was a mob-style hit job and it's likely to make a Trump victory more likely.
Yes, the American-born former Prime Minister of this country has waded into the argument, and he has decided that Trump is a victim of, well, bad lawfare. Lawfare is backfiring, Boris Johnson has said. And there's a few, actually, sort of his, I don't want to say ilk, of his group that have all backed this idea. Nadine Dorries, she's also been on Twitter to talk about how the trial has been unfair, and this just shows that, you know, if you can't get someone in the polls, then you'll go for them in the courts. But, yeah, I mean, this is quite dangerous rhetoric, really. And, I'm not really sure what the intent is here, but perhaps Boris Johnson would quite like a job maybe on his campaign.
As one Nigel Farage, who was also saying similar things today. Let's move on to the FT and this, well, shock announcement today from President Biden, but it seems like a really significant moment, a three-phase ceasefire.
Yeah, potentially, yes, which is, I think, the only reason that could justify Biden ruining the Trump conviction news day by talking about the Middle East, which divides Democrats quite strongly. Apparently, the US has been mediating a deal, and there is a prospective deal on the table. It's a three-stage plan. Stage one is Israel pauses hostilities, there's some exchange of hostages. Stage 2 is complete permanent ceasefire and the further exchange of hostages. And I can't immediately remember what stage 3 is, but I'm sure
rebuilding of Gaza.
There we go. I'm sure it's great. I mean, the slightly worrying thing about this, though, is that it doesn't sound as if actually both sides are on the same page about this. Netanyahu's made very clear that the war will continue until he gets everything he wants, and that he has authorised negotiators to discuss an outline of a deal. Hamas has welcomed a deal that talks about a permanent ceasefire. It's quite clear that Israel doesn't think that there's grounds for one yet. So it is progress, but I think America needs to take care that this isn't simply the Israeli government engaging with this process to buy time for further operations, which are continuing as of the present moment.
Well, Ava, Hamas have said tonight that they are positive about the deal, but as Henry was saying, Israel still insisting that they want to achieve their ultimate objective, which is the annihilation of Hamas.
Well, Netanyahu's under considerable pressure from some of the more far-right members of the coalition that is keeping him in power not to agree to a permanent ceasefire, and this deal is obviously dependent on that. You know, your first 6 weeks, you're going to have an immediate halting of hostilities. By phase 2, you're going to have Israeli troops being withdrawn from large swathes of Gaza, and then by stage 3, you're actually talking about, you know, the potential lead-on to defining Palestine as a state. And I mean, yes, if you are struggling to stay in power, that's going to be pretty tricky to agree to.
We shall see. Ava and Henry, thank you very much for the moment. We can take a break. Coming up, Sir Keir Starmer finally gives in to pressure and says Diane Abbott can stand as a Labour candidate, but will she? We'll discuss that next.
I can give you anecdotal evidence of how high cinema prices are, which I'm sure Phil will have an opinion on. The lockdown created habits of viewing, of streaming at our convenience. We love watching TV and film on our phones. And of course, we have great television. We have alternatives. We have gyms. We have restaurants. We have lifestyle choices that we didn't have maybe 30, 40 years ago.
That global figure, of course, is you know, made up of a whole series of different territories. For the UK, we're probably looking at even in terms of box office for this year. The industry analyst Gareth Street have indicated about 1.04 billion. Last year was 1.06. It's undoubtedly true that we knew this year would be a challenging year. We had the strikes for the actors and the screenwriters in the US, which has pushed back the production and the delivery of a large number of films, some into later this year, some into 2025. So, you know, no one would underestimate the challenges. There are broader cost of living issues and people's ability to spend, and we'll get on to ticket prices. But I think as the year gears up, certainly into the summer, into the end of the year, for the UK sector particularly, it's a very optimistic picture.
We all grew up on going to the cinema because Tom Cruise was in a film, these big adventure stories. John Travolta, of course. I'd still go out for John Travolta. And these days, I feel like that cultural space has been replaced by pop stars. So this summer, the events are Taylor Swift coming to the UK. We've had Ed Sheeran filling Wembley Stadium. We've had the likes of Adele. We have these totemic stars who we feel are somehow, perhaps it's a myth, but they feel more authentic, that they are sharing their lives with us.
You're absolutely right that in the social space, you know, pop stars and reality stars, etc., are filling part of that space. But that's complementary to Margot Robbie, to Tom Cruise, to Tom Hardy, to Chris Hemsworth, all those other people who do still drive movies. And, you know, obviously, you know, the studios and distributors are looking to create stars and for people to have resonance with audiences. But actually, it's also about the originality of the stories. So last year, of course, we had the, you know, almost unique cultural moment of Barbie and Oppenheimer together. We have coming up Deadpool and Wolverine, which when the trailer was released was seen by 365 million people in the first 24 hours, which is a record. There is still that excitement that can be engendered around the uniqueness of the big screen experience.